Welcome to Cognitive Vigilance Podcast. I'm here with Kyle, Rin, and James Sexton, who I've actually watched a few of your episodes with people, like podcasts. I saw you on Rolo, and I saw you on Lex Friedman, and yeah, I've really enjoyed watching a lot of your content that you've created. So I'm really excited for this conversation. One thing I wanted to start is kind of tell a little bit about yourself, and you're a divorce lawyer and how you kind of got into that field.
Yeah, I was born a young black boy. No, I'm kidding. I like to start my stories that way. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Brandy. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. It's always great to see you, Kyle. We've had great conversations in the past, and Rin, I'm happy to see you as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm a divorce lawyer in New York City, which is a big city to split the silverware in, and I've been a divorce lawyer for about 23 years. Before I was a divorce lawyer, I studied an undergraduate. I was a psychology major. I was on track to become a therapist. That's what I wanted to do. I went and was working on my master's degree. I was working on my PhD. After I finished my master's degree, I was teaching at NYU. And then I just decided, my first love, which was debate and argument and, extemporaneous speaking. And I also found out what professors make versus divorce lawyers. And I was like, all right, I'm making a shift. So I went to law school. And I've been a divorce lawyer for about 23 years. And then in 2018, I wrote a book called If You're in My Office, It's Already Too Late, A Divorce Lawyer's Guide to Staying Together, which a lot of my colleagues made fun of me for, because in theory, I was putting myself out of business writing a relationship self-help book, basically saying, like, here's all the things that people do wrong that land them in my office. And it was kind of based on the idea that my mom, who passed away some years ago, or actually right before the book was written, one of the things she used to say to me all the time is that she never knew how to define intelligence, but she could spot stupid a mile away. And I always thought that was kind of like, what is intelligence but the opposite of stupid, or the absence of stupid? So I kind of looked at it like, well, I don't know anything about how to make a relationship good, but I see all these ways that it falls apart for people that ultimately lands them in my office. So I ended up writing the book, and it was well received, by, critics, and the New York Times wrote about it. And I ended up, doing some media in regards to it. And then I did well with that. So I ended up being, I had a recurring segment on Steve Harvey's TV show for about 13 episodes. I for about 6 years, I've done Access Hollywood's, divorce correspondence stuff in LA and in New York, where I live. And then, kind of maybe about 5 months ago, I appeared on Underbelly, Mark Liata's channel. And that kind of caught fire. That's up to about 5 million views now. One of the people who saw it and enjoyed it was Lex Friedman, who I'd been a fan of for a long time. And he and I got in communication and ended up developing a friendship. I appeared on his show, and that's led to, a lot of other, really exciting opportunities, and some more that are coming up in the near future, some of which I can talk about, some of which I'm not allowed to yet. But, yeah, that's how a divorce lawyer ended up giving people relationship advice. It's a weird, twisty tale. And the way I've ended up here is that Kyle and I touched base some months ago because I was a fan of his point of view. He's a fan of my point of view. So we decided, well, let's have a chat on his show. And I think we planned on, like, we'll talk for like a half an hour, and like 2.5 hours later, we were both still at it, and kind of like, wow, we could probably do this for another 4 hours without, like, if we didn't need bathroom breaks. So he said, well, you got to come back on and jump on with Brandy and Rin. So I'm happy to be here. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Fantastic. I actually did. I saw you on one of those. I think it was the Soft
White Underbelly.
That one. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Well, Soft White Underbelly is like the coolest show, because it's, it's like all, like, I watched it for years, and it's all like, this person's a fentanyl addict, and they interviewed him, and this person, like, and it's always like horror show, like, it's like this person, like, like drinks LSD every morning before they go out and, like, have sex for money. And and meanwhile, I'm like, I would like to see that, and I kind of plug it and watch it. And one day I'm sitting in my office, and my secretary comes in, and she looks very puzzled, which is not, in a divorce lawyer's office, weird shit gets said to people all the time. But she comes in, and she looked, abnormally puzzled, and she goes, someone named Mark is on the phone, and he says he's something about a soft belly somebody with your, and I'm like, okay, this sounds like some kinky shit. I'll take that call. Let's see what's going on. And I said, hello. And he said, hi, Jim, this is Mark Leader from Underbelly. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, what's up, man? How you doing? He's like, good, good. He's like, are you familiar with the program? I said, yeah, I'm actually a big fan. I watch it frequently. And he said, well, I'd really like to have you on. And I said, well, you're aware I'm neither a prostitute nor a fentanyl addict, right? Like, I don't know what you've heard. And he said, no, there's kind of only so many of those you can interview. I'm trying to branch out into other things. And that's how I ended up on Underbelly. But I thought when he first called, I was like, oh shit, I got to try fentanyl now. But it turned out he just wanted to talk to me more slaves.
I actually clipped a part of that podcast and posted it because something you said really resonated just from what I've seen on the internet. Because you said something about, I think everything is going to swing in a traditional direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I've been seeing, well, it's hard to know if it's right because I see it on the internet, but it's like the internet is kind of like,
it doesn't always transfer to reality.
Yeah, it's kind of like a small version of like reality. Like if I'm in the real world, it doesn't feel that real. But like when I look on the internet, it feels more real. So it's hard to know how influential that is. But what makes you think that things are going to swing in a more traditional direction?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you something funny. You're the first person to comment to me on that section of the interview. And it's really because there's a, like whenever somebody says like, oh, well, I watched Underbelly and I really liked what you had to say about, and I'm like, okay, here it comes. Cause it's like 4 of the same thing. And it's never the 4 or 5 things I thought was the most interesting, but I'm a terrible gauge of like what I have to say that's interesting. Like whoever discovered water, it wasn't a fish. Like I'm so in my head that, I'll be talking to someone and they'll be like, oh, how was your day? I'm like, yeah, good. My client, like apparently his wife was sleeping with his brother and it turns out, and they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, I guess that is weird. Yeah, you're right. I didn't remember that normal people don't have that happen at work, but that happened at my work. That's Tuesday. But that idea about, I think what I said is that, our culture has a tendency to overcorrect and we tend to treat dandruff with decapitation. And I think we went so far in this postmodern, bizarre, like idea that everything is about balances of power and nothing has any real meaning except the meaning we attribute to it. And, even like that really leads not only to a form of nihilism, but also leads to, I would argue that this idea of identity politics and defining oneself by one's affiliations with what aspects of yourself are like a victim or disempowered ultimately leads to a form of actually rugged individualism, almost like an Ayn Rand kind of thing, because which they would claim to be the opposite of, because they like if you're saying, well, a man can't understand a woman's experience. Well, a woman can't understand a disabled woman's experience. Well, a disabled woman can't understand a disabled trans woman's experience. Well, a disabled trans woman's experience can't understand what a impoverished trans, and that would go, okay, so basically it's rugged individualism. Like every single person can't possibly understand anything anyone else has gone through unless they've had the exact same lived experience, which no one has had the exact same lived experience. So I think this is bound to fail, but then unfortunately our culture will not do, because it'll do what it always did, which, the 50s gave way to the 60s, the 60s gave way to the 70s. And it's always this pendulum swinging back and forth. So I see this like, everything like gender has no meaning. There's no construct to it at all. Biology is in no way ideology. Like it's all then turning into like a return to the opposite of that, which would be, again, very rigid gender roles, very biological determinism, which again, I believe is an overcorrection. Like I think is so I think we just do this as a culture. We tend to, the roaring 20s.
How do we make the pendulum why can't we make it come to the why does it always have to swing? So it feels like it goes farther and farther every time. So it's like, how can we make it come back?
Part of the going further and further, to your point there, is that I think that we get more and more advanced technologies, and with that we want to push the envelope more and more and more. So, like I'm sure there's transgenderism way back in the day, but like what we can do about it now and how we can treat it is completely different than how we could have, let's say even 500 years ago. So much to your point, just as we kind of go further and further down the line, as technology advances more and more, as we get more and more into each other's private lives through social media, we just feel the need to go further and further in one way or the other to try and put our view out there and try to bring things to where we want to see the world go.
So I'm
Yeah, and I
actually
think
interested.
there's oh no, I'd like to hear what Rin's saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Kyle, I think you're very right, and like what we see in the pendulum swinging is this kind of heavy increase driven by new technologies, but the cultural like iconography from like eras, right? Like I feel like we might see what you're describing in the same way we saw the hippies kind of being the defining culture of like the 60s, but there weren't that many of them, right? Like the majority of people in the 60s weren't hippies, but they were wildly distinct and culturally unique, and so they capture the zeitgeist without being representative.
Yeah, do we
So
define the culture by the fringe?
Right.
Well, I
right.
think we define the culture by what's most compelling. And like it was much more interesting to look at the hippies than it was to look at the people that were just going to college and living their lives like anybody else. Like a fuck ton of planes didn't crash last week, but the ones that did, it's way more of an interesting news story,
Yeah.
Like, building does not explode today isn't as interesting of a headline. So I think now we have all of this information has obviously become a form of garbage now. It comes at us all the time from every direction with almost no context. And we kind of don't know what to do with all of it, but certainly it's a huge attention economy. So we're trying to get, what's the most compelling, interesting thing that's going to capture people's attention. And of course, it's going to be extreme, crazy things. And so I think that that's why we get pulled so easily in that direction. It's the most compelling, most interesting stuff. And I think also, too, there's a very human tendency to, think that if you don't like a thing, the opposite of that thing must be good, right? Like, so,
and then a lot of it must be better.
Right. Like if you're too hot, oh my God, throw me in the freezer for a minute, but hang out the freezer for a minute and you're going to be like, holy shit. It's like the same reason. I mean, listen, Kyle, you'll appreciate it as a mechanic. Like when you get in the car and it's a hot day, you can turn the air conditioning up all you want. It's not going to immediately get cold. If I keep pressing the elevator button over and over, it's not going to make the elevator get there faster. But there's this feeling of like, there's something I can do about this that's going to like speed it up. And that should be whatever the opposite is, So if it's too hot, I want to make myself super cold. But really, no, you just want to be comfortable. So how do we actually get to the comfortable spot? And that's why I think there is a gigantic ignored middle, because there is this middle that's just not that fucking interesting. Like it's just not that interesting.
It's not sexy, so it doesn't sell.
Like we don't believe that there is no such thing as gender, and that there is if you identify as a woman, that makes you a woman. But we also don't run around committing hate crimes. And if someone says, hey, by the way, I'd like you to call me Shirley now, like I don't care, I'll call you Shirley. Like it's just like your parents made up a name. That's what names are. Like names are just someone decided that this is what we're going to call you. So like, I don't care. Like I don't want it to be illegal for me to use the wrong quote unquote pronoun, but I'm also not a dick. So like if somebody says to me, hey, do you mind calling me he, him, or do you mind calling me I don't care. Like, I don't like to offend people just to offend them. Like, there's no, in reality, I want people to be happy. I don't want them to feel, like you introduce me to somebody, we might have totally different political views, but I hope they live a good life. They're happy. I want to be a representative of good things in the world. And I want people to treat me with a certain respect and affection. But again, it's so much easier and more interesting to talk about who's the devil, and each side defines the other as the devil. And we just devolve into the same craziness we always have.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it because people act like if you just like use people's pronouns or whatever, like I'm the same way, but it's like if you do that, then you're like I wouldn't want to be forced to, but I'll do it out of courtesy. Like if
and I think I understand
doing things out of courtesy,
right? And I understand why it feels icky to do it, because it feels like you're voting. Like it feels like by doing it, I'm somehow saying, yeah, this is how we should relate to each other, which I don't think is the case. But I'm also not doing it to be disrespectful to someone. That's never my goal. Like I really don't ever meet, like I was raised to be respectful to people. You know, like I was raised very dogmatically Roman Catholic, but if I went to, you know, a funeral or some kind of an event, if I went to a Shiva call at a Jewish friend of our family's home and you were supposed to put on a kippah, I would put that on. Like if someone tells me that in my tradition, this is what we do, if it didn't run against my faith, like, of course, I'll respect. Like, if you say to me, take your shoes off when you go in your house. Okay. Like, if that's your rules, that's what you do. If you say grace before you know, whatever you do, okay, I'm going to honor that and respect it. I'm not going to say a prayer to some, you know, different deity I don't believe in or that would betray my own faith. But I will, you know, sit with you and I'll be quiet while you pray. I won't say, well, I refuse to be in the room while you worship. You know, like, it's silliness. So I really do think that most people are like us. Yeah. They're not obnoxious, nasty people who want to go around hurting each other. And that's what's wrong with the far left and the far right, is that they both convince the other that there's this boogeyman, you know, like the left is saying that there are just people running around like doing the Jussie Smollett, you know, like it's this MAGA country and we're just attacking. It's just ridiculous. Like it's ridiculous. But also to say that, oh, there's no such thing as racism, or that we're done and we're totally transcended that, and there's no legacy of institutional racism and it's had no effect. Well, that's ridiculous. Like a 5-year-old could figure out that if you've had 3 generations of poverty and fatherlessness and incarceration, you know, that, yeah, that's going to have an impact on people. But is the solution to that impoverishing one side and enriching another unnecessarily? Or is it like, hey, we should give, you know, free college education to people who qualify for certain, like we've got to come up with solutions that might not be that sexy. Like I kind of liked when politicians were just dorky, boring people. You know, like I like a politician who's smarter than me and less charismatic.
I love that. Know? You should become a libertarian. That's like all of them.
I kind of am. Well, you're absolutely right. Yeah, the libertarians I know are like boring policy people. Like, and they kind of are like, well,
hey, I take offense.
I think we should take it a step further and go back to when bankers were dorky, not sexy either. I think that's a big part of that was like, you know, the cocaine and banking coming together
that's really storm.
I really love this message of like moderation, because like when I think about nutrition, it's always like, it's so simple. Like, don't eat the fattiest brisket and dump a whole stick of butter in your coffee. And don't like go full vegetarian. Include
Dude,
like
if you can hit your macros, you can.
Yeah, like generally, yeah. Well, I'm not against that, but like if you just don't eat like an asshole, right, then you're probably gonna be okay. But that's not sexy, right?
Kyle's book is now available on Amazon. Don't eat like an asshole. That's
so right, but that doesn't sell.
Don't eat like. Actually, I have to say something. I think I would stop and pick up the book "Don't Eat Like an Asshole." I would be like, "What is this about? This is." It says "Don't eat like an asshole," not "Don't eat asshole." Okay, good.
Yeah, that's the zeitgeist of the era. Asses on the menu. I do think it's an American problem, though. We as a like culture, my perspective, and I would love to hear the lawyer perspective on this. Americans like to exploit cultural loopholes. Like my understanding is something like in like the UK, culture is very like, you know, if you have like a cultural precedent, it's very like, do not break that. Like that is a huge, you know, whereas here we like applaud people who are like, oh, you just exploited a bunch of people and made a ton of money. Like, okay, good job. Now let's write a law so that doesn't happen again. And
well, we like as a culture, we've always liked like rugged individualism in some ways. Like we like, you know, for all the criticisms of like a Martin Shkreli and people like that, like we kind of love those characters. Like we love outliers and we love, you know,
right. We like that. We celebrate villains, right? Like because Martin Shkreli is an easy, you know,
right. And in the UK, you know, it's much more like you don't ask someone, how are you doing, for fear that they will say, well, my mother died recently. And now you're in an emotional conversation. Like like I figured this out. My family now, my sister and my father live in Vermont, and I live in New York City, and there really are no two more different places than that, like possibly in the universe, because I when I go visit them in Vermont, and you go in the grocery store, and like, you know, you're standing there at the checkout, and the checkout person goes, how you doing? And you go, good, good. How you doing? And they go, well, my cat's been sick lately. And you're like, wait, what? No. Like, you're not supposed to say something like that. You're like, I was supposed to say, how you doing? And you're supposed to say, good, how you doing? And then that's it. Like, we're not going to actually talk about what's going on in our lives. Like, but they are like that. Like, they will. And my son went to college there for 4 years, and he came back to New York and like had no idea how to function, because he would like go in and be like, what do you mean I can't pay for my coffee with a poem? Like, he really thought that's how you live, you know? But I really do think as other countries, they're not as into this individualism thing. We love that. Like, Martin Shkreli's not the problem. Martin Shkreli is, you know, it's not.
Do you
not
think
to quote
individualism is the problem? I would.
No, I don't think
disagree with that.
individualism is the problem. I think that we always mistake the side effect for the core problem. Like, Martin Shkreli is just an opportunist in the system. Like, Marilyn Manson once said, you know, like, when talking about the people that didn't like him and thought that he was like a corruptioning force in society, is he said, look, I'm your shit. You should be ashamed of what you've eaten. And I thought that was actually a pretty fair comment. Like, Martin Shkreli's our shit. We should be, we have a system that works a certain way when it comes to how pharmaceuticals are priced, what health insurance companies will pay. And a lot of people profit from that system. Pharmaceutical executives, politicians and lobbyists, like a lot of people profit from that. Martin Shkreli saw a place in there to play the game largely within the rules, you know, and people don't like that. Well, okay, I'm sorry that you don't like that, but it's not him. If it wasn't him, it would have been somebody else. Maybe someone less brazen, maybe someone less this way about it. But he was very much the type that was like, yeah, you don't like this. No, it's not me. You don't like the game I'm playing that you made the rules on that I figured out a way around, you know? So I think that's the problem is not the content of the vessel. It's the vessel itself, as far as I'm concerned.
So you mentioned, so have you talking about like how things kind of shift after COVID, did you see anything in regards to like divorce, like going up, going down?
Yeah,
like,
divorce went up. It went up everywhere.
Oh, it went up? Because the
it went up
marriage rate
everywhere.
went up too.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
well, because first of all, everyone was like, okay, marriage always has been a popular technology, despite the fact that it's got an unbelievable failure rate. But yes, it's very popular. And especially if like you're not allowed to go anywhere. Like if you close all the movie theaters and sporting venues, people are like, well, I guess all we can do is fuck. Like there's nothing left. So we might as well get married, you know, something, or we'll cook. Like I need someone to eat all this sourdough bread I've suddenly learned how to make, you know? So that was a piece of it. But the divorce rate went up because there was the court system closed for periods of time. So there was a bit of a backlog. So it was actually the usual steady stream of divorces, but it had backed up a little bit, right? So the pipe just backed up. It wasn't that there was more going in, but then there was more going in because, you know, you said for better or for worse, you didn't say for lunch. And all of a sudden people were just together like all the time, like for lunch. And it was very much, and there was economic stress on people. And suddenly it was, okay, now the kids are home full time and they have to do remote learning. So one of us of a 2-family working household has to oversee that. And which of us, because that turns into a conversation of whose job's more important and whose job is less important. And then the question is that gauged by money only, or is that also gauged by opportunity and future direction? So it forced a lot of conversations that people would rather not have, you know, and it forced a lot of people to be close to each other and with their kids in ways that, you know, were uncomfortable for a lot of people. A lot of people, it was their salvation. I mean, I can say this, I don't think you would mind at all. My law partner, who's been my law partner for 13 years, when I first hired him right out of law school, he was newly married, no kids. Lovely, wonderful wife who was his college sweetheart. And, now they have 3 kids. I'm godfather to their youngest, their daughter. And when COVID first hit, I said, okay, we work remotely. It's no problem. And I thought, Jesus Christ, this guy's going to be home with his wife and 3 kids. So he went from leaving the house at 5 a.m. every day and getting home at 7 o'clock at night, 5 days a week, to literally being home with his wife and 3 young kids all the time. And I went, this is either going to end in divorce or something else. And I have to tell you, it was like it transformed him as a father. Like he is so deeply involved in his kids' lives. He loves it. It actually changed when we came back to in-person operations. He said to me, listen, I'll do whatever you, because the guy's a soldier. He's an unbelievable lawyer and a great guy. But he said to me, look, if you want me to be here full time, I'll be here full time. And I said, no, man, listen, you know what? Like, you're never gonna get those years back. I have adult sons. I missed a lot of things because I really had to be in the office all the time. I was like, you didn't miss a bit of productivity while you were working remotely. I was like, work, come when you have court, come to the office when you feel like it. The rest of the time, listen, man, be there. And now this guy is in a rhythm where in the morning he has breakfast with his wife and his kids. He sees them off to school, and then he hustles hard for a bunch of hours. They get home from school. He spends a little time with them, has a little dinner, and then he does some more work. And he's found a rhythm that works for him. So, it's not that the closeness or the struggle and strain of things like a pandemic or economic challenges is necessarily toxic to a relationship. It tests it, and sometimes you test something and you'll see how strong it is. And sometimes you'll test something and it just busts, because there were these minor cracks in it. So I think it just revealed that. I think the people that came out stronger came out with an unbelievable sense of like, oh yeah, like we got this, like we just rocked it through that, and now throw whatever you want to throw at us and we're going to be fine. And the people that were on fragile ground, they broke, and they drowned. So that's how it is.
These people that want to like, sorry.
I think this kind of goes back to a point that we were kind of touching on earlier, is that like telling everybody that like your relationship is going to be very individual to each person isn't a very sexy message. Because if I tell you once again, like, oh, if you just listen to all the red pill content creators, which I do advocate for, then your life is going to be perfect, then that doesn't require any work on your part. Like all you have to do is consume the information. Like there is work that needs to be done on each individual's part. And for a lot of people, if you give them accountability, there's some people that just don't fucking like to hear it. If I tell you, back to a nutrition point, that you have to go to the gym consistently and you have to watch what you eat, then once again, that puts the marker back on you. But if I tell you it's big seed oils, big whatever that's making you sick, then once again, now you don't have to do anything. People don't like the idea of just simple but effective.
Right. And your failure is not your fault. It's big seed, or it's this, or it's there, and so it's lovely when your failure is not your fault. Like I'm always suspicious whenever someone is telling me their life story and they're the hero. Like they're always like in their own story. Like when if somebody tells me their story and they're a flawed character in the story, it's a lot more credible to me. And as someone who, for a living as a trial lawyer, like it's full contact storytelling. And I always tell clients, like when they come in and they start telling me the story of their marriage, I'm like, listen, any story about your life where you're the hero is questionable. Like you need to be, maybe sometimes you're heroic and sometimes you're, or the victim, exactly. Well, because of what is a victim but like another form of hero? It's like a hero in their tenacity and their spirit that they survived this somehow.
If someone's telling you that they're a victim, then usually the objective of the story is to tell you like, I overcame this. Right. Okay, well, what's the other side?
Legit victim too. They're dealing with victim shit. Like they're over there being victims. Like I don't think that like actual victims are like thoughts and prayers. Like they're not tweeting. They're fucking dealing with what they're dealing with. So I really think that we need to, as a culture, like just get our head out of our collective asses and realize that, somebody once said to me, Neil Postman, who was one of my professors in graduate school, he wrote some great books, including Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Television, and Technopoly, The Surrender of Culture to Technology. He passed away some years ago, but he was a brilliant, brilliant mind. And his books are still as relevant today as they were 20, 30 years ago. But one of the things that he used to say all the time is that, because he was very critical of television, and he was critical of television not when it was being silly and entertaining. He actually thought that's what TV should be for. what he thought was dangerous is when it was purporting to teach you things, or when it was purporting to tell you. Like, I actually think the dumb shit on YouTube is the most undangerous part. It's the stuff that is trying to pretend it's serious, and in fact, it's just attention grabbing. You know, like what he used to say is, you know, teaching children, like Sesame Street. You know, when Sesame Street first came out, it was like the first children's TV show that had an educational component to it. And they used to say, well, Sesame Street is great because it teaches children to love learning. It teaches children that learning can be fun and to love learning. And what Neil used to say, which was a controversial thing, is he used to say, no, it teaches children to love learning insofar as learning resembles Sesame Street, which, by the way, most things don't resemble. So like most things, like calculus does not resemble Sesame Street. Like a lot of the things you need to learn in life aren't fun to learn. They're not that interesting, but they're fucking important. You know, like how to purify water isn't fun to learn. Making sourdough bread is fun to learn, but like how to purify water. But one of those two things is going to be way more important in the chance of a zombie apocalypse or a nuclear attack. So like you kind of have to think about, and he used to also say too that in addition to teaching children to love learning, Sesame Street teaches children to love television. You know, so it's the same thing with, like, you give your kid an iPad and you teach your kid, you know, that, I let my kid watch educational things on the iPad. Okay. But you're also teaching them to love the iPad. You're teaching them to love that way of learning and interacting. You're teaching them to have a relationship with a screen, you know, and that is in and of itself. Because right now, yeah, you're using it for something thoughtful and perhaps deliberate, but it won't always be that way. And so now, once you've accustomed a kid to getting their information this way, what second order effects is that going to have?
Also, shout out to Rolo in chat. This show, 2 viewers. We actually have 15, Rolo. it's
YouTube.
Another podcast with.
We're actually just here to amuse ourselves more than anything.
You know?
That's why this podcast is great. We just hang out.
Thank you, Rolo. I appreciate you.
We love Rolo. Rolo's a great example, by the way, of somebody who, you know, I was a fan of forever. And then I did the Softwunderbelly interview, and I'm sitting there watching, you know, his show, as I always did. And I'm watching it on my TV screen. And all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, this interesting clip came up, and he's like showing this clip. And I'm like, Rolo's got me on his screen. This is so cool. He's like, yeah, we got to get that Sexton guy on here sometime. And I'm like a little kid talking to my TV. Like I'm going like, oh my God, I'm right here. I'm right here. Oh my God, I'll totally talk to you. Like, how do I get in touch with you? Like, holy shit, you know, and I'm like, okay, let me do this in the comments, you know, like I'll super chat, you know, let me tell him, you know. So somehow I don't know how I sent up a flare and got in touch with him. But it was actually really, really funny because I was so like fanboyed out about the fact that I was like, dude, like, I'm a huge fan.
What do you think's beneficial about the red pill in regards to like regards? Yeah, like
I'm hesitant to say. I'm hesitant to co-sign on the broad definition of the concept.
Okay, no.
What I will say about Rolo specifically, Rolo specifically is I think he is an amalgam. He is a perfect union of contrary things, and I really like that about him. He's obviously one of the most intelligent commentators on gender stuff, I think, working right now. He's a brilliant writer. I mean, I actually look forward to, you know, his email blast that he sends out with essays, like the one that he put out this week about like guys who don't fuck, who hate guys who fuck. Like he just mixes wit with, you know, with really intelligent, thoughtful stuff that is so multidisciplinary. There's cognitive psychology, there's evolutionary psychology, there's gender stuff. And what's interesting is, like, I just don't think that he is a misogynist. And I think it's hilarious that he's lumped in or accused of being misogynist, because he actually has, I think, you know, an incredibly like pro-feminist, for lack of a better term. Like, he's very much about like letting human beings be what a human being wants to be, and allowing one's natural proclivities to develop free from this insane amount of bizarre cultural pressure and allowing us to just become who we are. So I always just liked his message, but I'm equally amused by his sense of humor and his intelligence and his point of view, as I am with the way people lose their fucking minds misinterpreting almost everything that comes out of his mouth, because like when somebody doesn't like Andrew Tate, like I get it. Like I think he's deliberately being cartoonish. He's deliberately taking these extreme positions, but ultimately, and apologies to Rolo, I think he's kind of a dork. Like I think he's like absolutely a geek.
Red pill, though. I think that
no, I don't mean Andrew Tate. I mean Rolo. I think is a dorky guy. Like at his heart, he's a geek. He's a reader. He's a voracious reader. He's a very talented and academic type of writer. Yeah, he's funny. Yeah, he's like a cool dude. But at the end of the day, like he's an intellectual at heart. And there is a time where we would acknowledge him as a public intellectual. He doesn't wear this, like maybe if he wore the suits that Jordan Peterson wears and he had that weird like voice of talking, like people would go, oh, okay. Like he'd be doing stadium tours now instead, but like he doesn't look like a college professor. Jordan Peterson looks like a college professor and quotes Jung, really effectively without attribution, so like, I think that the red pill space in general, and Rollo specifically, I always liked it because I think he and I are cut from the same mold in the sense that we both really are realists. We just want to like have a naked lunch where everyone's being honest about what's at the end of their fork. Like we're just not two people that just want to sit around bullshitting. Like I think we just are honest about what we're observing from where we're sitting. And I see as a divorce lawyer, like this isn't theory. This is the people sitting. I've done thousands of divorces over 23 years. I've talked to the cheater and the cheated on. I've represented the person with the substance abuse issue and the person married to the person with substance abuse issue. I've represented victims of domestic violence. I've represented perpetrators of domestic violence. So I am not, in an echo chamber. I'm in the opposite of an echo chamber. I am forced to listen to, get to know, and advocate for the positions of people that are in totally opposite circumstances. So on the same day, in the same courthouse, I can be arguing for alimony and then go upstairs and argue against alimony in roughly the same situation. And so I really have to practice a form of radical empathy to do that well. I have to like put myself in the head of this person, understand my argument, understand the best arguments against what I'm advocating for so that I can proactively deal with it. And I think fundamentally that's the same thing that Rolo does all the time. I think that that's what the rational male is he talks like in all of his books, particularly Religion was one of my favorite ones, but like all of his books really they simultaneously attack and defend, in a very lawyerly way, because he has baked in to his dissertation and explanation ways to get in front of and eradicate the counter arguments to his point of view. And then he manages to do that in kind of a fun way. So that's why I'm a fan of him specifically. But I think his point of view, which I don't think anybody's done it better than him. At least not. I mean, there's a lot of people do it really well. I love Mike Sartain. There's a lot of people in the space that I really like what they do and how they do it. But I just think he's sort of like the event horizon of it. He's like as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with you. So do you think right now, what is your view of marriage? Like, do you think it can be saved? Do you think it's like outdated
technology? I thought
technology?
You were proposing to me for a minute, Brandy. I was excited. I was just going to insist on a prenup. What's my view of marriage? I think that marriage remains a very popular technology, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
But do you think it's an effective technology? And do you think
only an idiot could claim that it's ineffective? Like, if by effective you mean like, is it okay despite a 56% fail rate? And that's being nice because that's just the ones that end in divorce. And like, how many people do you know that didn't get divorced but are miserable and hate each other or wish they had never got married? Like, because I don't see that as a win. Like, I don't look at people that are like, hey, we've been miserable and we don't even have sex anymore, but we stuck it out. Like that's not a win. That's actually way worse than getting divorced as far as I'm concerned. Like if somebody says to me, hey man, yeah, I was married. We grew apart. We got divorced. You know, I had to give away half of my stuff. You know, it's unfortunate. I mean, that sucks. You know, that's not what you'd wish on somebody. But if you said you can have that, or you can have a loveless, sexless, miserable existence with another person who barely tolerates you, and most of the time is just looking at you with scorn or derision, I'd be like, fuck that. Just get divorced. Like you can have all my stuff. You don't even have to have half as long as I don't have to live that life. Like that life sounds like that's like saying, do you want to be killed or do you want to be tortured and then killed? Like, well, clearly just kill me then. Like, you know, they don't have to. So I think that marriage is a preposterously unsuccessful technology. So I think we have to, if we wanted to do something about that, we either have to radically change the way we approach it, or we have to create, I think, barriers to entry. Like, I think it has to be something that, because I don't think barriers to exit is the solution. I don't think that like this idea of eradicating
marriage is the barrier to exit. Marriage is the barrier to exit. That's the whole point.
Well, it's a barrier to relationship expert in right. It's a barrier to terminating a relationship easily. You know, like I get that, but it's not really like barriers to exit is not what we need. You know, like all of these guys that say like, oh, we have to get rid of no fault divorce. That's like saying like, oh, we have to get rid of all these emergency rooms because there's all these sick people in them, and that way people won't be sick anymore. And it's like, well, that's fucking ridiculous.
A cough causing a cold.
Yeah, it's the joke I make where like at the end of the day when I'm tired, I'll say to my staff, I'm like, all right, I'm going home. These fucking people can stay married for all I care. And I'll just leave, you know, and because the joke is like, it's not like if I quit tomorrow, these people will be like, well, now we've got to stay married. You know, Sexton's not here anymore to get us divorced. Like they'll find someone else to get them divorced, or they'll just do what we used to call an Irish divorce. You go out for milk and never come back. You just leave, you know, and then you don't sort your shit out. So I feel like, you know, if we created, because we've never tried this, and again, if you want to try something, try a different approach, right? Like I would say create barriers to entry. I mean, how is it that, you know, gun violence, I'm not suggesting it doesn't exist. It does, right? Gun violence exists. And, you know, I understand that we should not just like hand out firearms. Like I'm a licensed, you know, gun owner. I appreciate the fact that there has to be some barriers to the purchase of a firearm. Like, I don't think a 12-year-old should be able to go into a store and walk out with a Glock. You know, I think it's probably better that we don't allow, you know, 10-year-olds to buy unlimited amounts of like hollow points. Like, I think these are some reasonable restrictions here. But the fact that I am a attorney who passed character and fitness, has zero criminal record of any kind, and it took me 9 months to get my permit to purchase one firearm, one pistol in New York City, which I then could only fire at the one gun range in the entire of New York City. Like, this is insanity. And then to go, you know, we really need to have stricter gun laws. How much stricter could they be than that, you know? And there's still gun violence. Like, I could have just gone to the Bronx and bought a gun illegally in like an hour instead of the 9 months to do it properly and thousands of dollars more in terms of the amount of time and effort and fingerprints and the processing fees and everything else. So, you know, if we can agree that there should be some licensure of firearms or some restriction on that. Okay. I actually think that divorce, like, let me say this. I think shitty marriage hurts a lot more people than firearms in the United States. I think it causes a lot of more lasting damage on people than firearms in the United States, but we don't have a 24-hour wait period to get married. You can literally like pick up a stripper in Vegas, go to Elvis for $50 at the chapel on the thing and walk out.
Denny's.
Right. Yeah. And so to me, why not say like, you know, if you have to have a 5-day waiting period to buy an assault rifle, why don't we say like, yeah, I'm glad you want to get married right now. Very exciting. We're happy for you. There's a 1-week waiting period. you know, or you have to take this quiz that shows you understand that you've opted out of the title system, and you have to understand what the spouse's elective share is, which for those of you playing at home, that means that you can't disinherit your spouse. So even if you try to leave everything to your kids or your cousin or your mom or your dad or your best friend or your secretary, your spouse can say, I don't care what his will says or her will says, I want 1/3 of the gross estate or $300,000, whichever.
Wait, they can do that?
Oh yeah. They can invalidate your will. Yeah.
Wait, a spouse can do that?
Yes, it's called your spouse's elective share. It's a federal
that
law.
just really put some shit together in my brain. But
so
there are so many things. When you get married,
wow.
you buy a house, you get a lead paint disclosure, a HUD one that explains the loan and all the things, and here's what your interest rate would be if you paid off the whole. You get married, you don't get a fucking pamphlet. You don't even get a 1-page leaflet that says you just did the most legally significant thing you're ever going to do other than die. You know, you didn't get anything, and you don't know. And the first time, I'll tell you, the first time most people find out what happened to them legally when they got married is when they're in my office, and it is too late. Like, wait, what do you mean everything in my 401k she's entitled to? It's in my sole name.
I thought that's not always, because I've known a lot of people. Is it dependent on state? Because I know a lot of people that have gotten divorced and they haven't. Yeah, it's not like they haven't had to pay alimony. It depends on if she works, right, or if she doesn't work.
One variation or another of roughly the same things. It's sort of like saying, you know, what I will tell you is divorce law is like the menu at Taco Bell. It's like 5 ingredients put together 30 different ways, but it's 5 fucking ingredients. That's all it is. Like, yeah, there'll be some minor variant on how spousal support is in Massachusetts versus New York versus Texas, but it's like roughly the same thing. It just has some minor change to it. So like the only difference between the Crunch Wrap Supreme and the Gordita Wrap Supreme, it's like one minor ingredient. It's the same thing. You're gonna end up on the toilet. Like it's fine. Like it's fine. You can say like, oh no, this is slightly different, but it's like this much different.
Would you be a fan of separating kind of like the idea of spiritual marriage from like the legal binding nature? I knew it was Brandy. I got you.
Yeah. Can I actually ask another? Can I just tag onto that? Because so as I said, before we started, I'm a libertarian, and so I'm interested in the idea of having that, like, of getting married. And then there's also this aspect of like, well, like insurance, like these like basic things. Like how do people do that? Libertarians that don't want the state involved in their relationships, but like we want to have the union and like some of the benefits, but we don't want to have to go all the way into like that kind of
what you don't want the government involved in your marriage.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, you know, this is something that Rolo talks about in the book Religion, where he talks about covenant marriage versus, you know, legal marriage and those concepts. And I think he does it probably even better than I can. So that's why I consider that a plug for that book, because I think he articulates those concepts and that distinction really well. And that's coming from someone who, you know, Rolo's a very happily married guy, you know, but also someone who's very true to who he is. And I think that is a compliment to the kind of marriage a person can have if they're not afraid to define it the way that they're going to define it for themselves and for the people who, like, if the two people in the marriage are happy with the dynamic in the marriage, that's kind of all that matters, you know, which is, I think, actually a very libertarian thing. Like to say, we are going to create our own sort of sovereign nation in this household, and our rules, as long as we both are okay with those rules, and this is something that we feel sort of sustains and feeds the best of us, and will sustain and feed and be good for our children or our pets or our plan in life, like that's all that really matters, you know. And that's the family is supposed to be, a very autonomous, sovereign kind of a nation in and of itself. So I think that's a very libertarian concept, the concept of a pair bond, of a family dynamic or a family unit. But I do think that making the distinction between, because look, truly libertarian people, there was a time, and the best metaphor for this actually was gay and lesbian couples before marriage equality. So there was a time where 23 years ago, when I first started practicing family law, people would come in and they would say, look, you know, we're gay. We want it, because New York City, you know, is a huge gay population. and they'd come in and they'd say, look, we can't marry, but we want to like approximate some of the rights that come with marriage and some of the obligations that come with marriage, like to protect each other. It was basically like they were saying, we want a prenup, even though we can't get married.
Yeah.
Like we want a
yes,
contract.
exactly. Yes.
So we used to do cohabitation agreements. We used to do estate planning. Like what was interesting is you had to do like 5 different things and like tens of thousands of dollars of legal work to do what somebody else could do for $50 with Elvis at the Denny's in Vegas, you know, like, and that seemed very unfair, you know, that like, well, look, if you're crazy enough to want to sign on for this technology of marriage, like, fuck it. Like, why should heterosexual people have all the misery? Like, yeah, go ahead. Like, if you hate gay people, definitely let them get fucking married. Like, what? Like, why would you not let them get, especially if you hate them? Like, if you are a homophobic person who hates gay people, make them get married. Like, ruin the gay lifestyle. Yeah, they're out there having a blast otherwise. Like, trust me, I live in West Chelsea. They're having a fucking good time, okay? Like, we don't have parades for the way we have sex. They do. Like, they have so much fun from what I could tell. It's not my flavor, but God bless them. You know, they're having a good time. And then all of a sudden, like, I have a number of gay friends, and I remember when marriage equality happened, I remember saying to one of my buddies who had been with, you know, his boyfriend for a long time. And I said to him, you know, his guy I did jujitsu with. And I said to him, I said, so, you know, you psyched about this, you know? And he was like, about what? And I was like, about marriage, you know, you can get married now. And he goes, are you serious? I was like, yeah. He goes, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, we never had to have the conversation. He's like, do you understand? He's like, I never had to have the conversation. He's like, I could be dating somebody for 2 years and they'd go, where's this going? And I would go, oh, I wish we could marry, but the state, damn it. I wish we could marry. I love you so much, but we just can't. The man won't let us. And he's like, now he's like, I might as well be straight. He's like, I have to have conversations like, well, where's this going? And are we going to get married? And are we going to have kids? And he was like, oh my God, it was so great to be like, yeah, I wish I could have kids that would like take all my money, never let me sleep and ruin everything. But, you know, I just can't because I'm gay. He's like, now it's like, oh yeah, it's totally fine to have kids and adopt or have surrogates. So I really think that, you know, when you tell somebody they can't have something, they're like, why can't I have it? And I get that. It's very human, right? It's very libertarian, actually. When you're like, you can't go in there. You're like, well, why? Now I want to go in there. I want to know what that's about. But the truth is, like, who are you to tell me I can't go in there? You know, but it's like, you know, you can't eat those bugs. What do you mean I can't eat those? Like, I wasn't going to eat those fucking bugs. But now you've told me I'm not allowed to. I'm kind of interested, you know? So I really think that marriage is something that anyone with a brain in their head looking at it honestly and looking at the numbers and looking at it dispassionately is going to go, this is a terrible sucker's bet. Like, this is a bad idea. And if you want to have a wedding, go have a wedding. Like, you don't have to get married to have a wedding. Go have a wedding. Like, you don't have to get the state involved in that. Like, you've been to weddings. Have you ever checked the paperwork? Like, your mom and dad, were they married? If your mom and dad were married, did you ever ask to see the paperwork? Did you ever say, like, you know, did you ever go over to a married friend's house and they're like, oh, we got married a few months ago. And you're like, I'm sorry, I'd like to see, can I see the license, please? I just want to make sure everything's in order. Okay, very good. You know, like, no one looks at your marriage license. Like, you don't sign your marriage license at your wedding. You usually sign it in the back of the church or like the day after or whatever. Like, very rare. Like, it's not part of the ceremony. So have as many ceremonies as you want, you know, stand there and promise whatever you want to promise to each other and pronounce each other man and wife, and then go about living your fucking life, because you don't actually have to do that thing.
But you're saying that there are options for people that might want some of the benefits. Are you saying that it's more?
Well, now it's a different world. It's a different world now, because now you can actually, without marrying, you can have domestic partner benefits on your insurance. You can have, like, you can have anything you want to. Like, you can have a platonic friend and marry them. Like, if I had a best friend, I don't have to be dating a person or homosexual to marry a man. There's no, like, if I go in and say I want a marriage license for this guy and they're not going to be like, well, first you got to have sex with each other. Like, no, you don't. Like you don't. You could just get married and put each other on the health insurance. Like who cares? Like I'm not suggesting that's a great idea, but I mean you could for business, I guess. But you know, at the end of the day, like you don't have to be in love to get married. You don't have to be sexual partners to each other to get married. Like it's just the legal status. So the only real things that you can't approximate is there is a tax benefit to being married.
Yeah.
Right. If you're married and you have children in common, you don't have to argue about head of household or dependency exemptions. And if you are married, you're able to file married filing jointly, which is the most favorable tax filing status in terms of its what deductions are available and what schedules attach.
And you
So,
can't file jointly unless you get married. That's the
correct.
one thing that you
Correct.
can't tax. Yes.
Correct. But you know, great news, gang. Like that's boring tax law. Like we could all just get together. You know, listen, I don't care what your political party is. Most people will say, hey, you know what? If people want to avail themselves of the tax benefits of some because the idea was if you're married, that you're going to, in all likelihood, stimulate the economy. Like we had an interest in getting people married. Why? Married people buy houses. Married people have kids. People with kids buy lots of shit. You know, people like it was an idea that you're going to stimulate the economy by encouraging people to get married. You know, I mean, the truth is a lot of most of the single people I know spend just as much money as the married people. They just spend it on cool shit like watches and cars, you know, but like they still spend or travel, you know, they spend it on a lot. Like I joke with my sons that I'm like, you're my Ferrari and you're my Lamborghini. Like you guys cost way more than like any luxury item I could have bought, you know, and great investment, wonderful. I'd rather have my kids than have a Ferrari, you know. It'd be great if I could have had both. But, you know, at the end of the day, like I really believe that if we want to, we don't have to buy into this thing anymore as a technology. But the problem is, I really think misery loves company. I will tell you, once I was divorced and spending time with married friends, it's shocking how many of them are A, unhappily married, and B, will tell me how badly I need to get married. Like, would seem the opposite. Like to say, like, like I hate being married. It's the worst. But really, dude, you shouldn't be alone. Like, you should settle down. And you're like, wait, why? Like, you hate it. Like, I'm gonna leave right now and go do whatever I want. Like whatever, I'm not going to ask anyone permission. I'm going to do whatever I want. And you will never get to say that right now. Like you're all like, these are all guys who are, or even the women friends, that it's just like their life is tethered to this other person who isn't always looking to enhance their life. And very often when they go like, oh, I want to go do this awesome thing, they're like, why do you get to do an awesome thing? I didn't get to do an awesome thing. And you're like, instead of going, okay, cool, you go do that awesome thing, and the next week I'm going to do this awesome thing and you can watch the kids. Like it's much more a sense of like, well, fuck you, I'm miserable, you're going to be miserable too, you know? So, and then they look at me and go, I want you miserable too. But it's like, why would any of you impose this on anyone?
So I'm very curious to tap into that knowledge of 23 years of what you've seen. Do you have advice for the dating scene today? Like, I know you wrote a book about this, but what would be some of your salient points of like how to avoid winding up in that spot?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the central thesis of my book is if you're not married, think about the fact that look at a spouse. Like a spouse, a person you're going to marry, like it's a job description. This is your roommate, your travel companion, potentially your co-parent or your pet co-parent. This is your financial, you know, partner. This is like, so you might be a great boyfriend or a great girlfriend and suck at all or most of those other things. Like, you know, the things, the traits that make for an interesting sex partner or romantic partner may not be the traits that make for a good roommate, or may not be the traits that make for a good co-parent, you know? So really identify like what it is. Like it would be like saying, you know, I need to have surgery. How is this brain surgeon? And I go, he's very handsome. What? Like, okay, I don't fucking care. Like, that's bad. Like, I want the brain surgeon who's like ugly and got thrown in the locker a lot. And the way that he rebelled was that he was going to be so smart and be a surgeon and make a lot of money. Like, I don't want a charismatic person as my brain surgeon. You know, I want a really dorky person. So I think it's the same thing, which is like, look at the traits that make for a good spouse. If that's the position you want to fill, sometimes that's going to make you realize, I don't actually want to fill that position. That job description may not actually be a job I want to fill.
So for your take on that, for people in those situations who have a great boyfriend or a great girlfriend, whatever, and then they're like, you would be a bad in all these sort of categories. Do you advocate like those folk like restructuring their relationships, or do you think people can start piecemeal building
I was
their
gonna
relationships?
say, what about like living apart together?
Yeah,
so
right. I'm a relationship libertarian, so I believe that rather than being constrained, like I believe tradition is peer pressure exerted by dead people.
Love that.
Like that's what tradition is. Like it's peer pressure from dead people. So you know, I don't accept.
Oh, it's like that one.
As an excuse that, you know, well, this is how your great grandfather did marriage. Okay, my great grandfather did a lot of shit differently than I do it. Like he didn't have godlike technology in the palm of his hand. Like he was probably going to die by 50. You know, like there's a lot of things that our life was different. So I'm a fan of saying, listen, you know, what works for the two of you? Like you know, I'll tell you a funny story. The relationship that I'm in and I've been in for quite some time, which is a very happy one. We don't spend a ton of time together. I think that's actually one of the secrets to the relationship because we always have a lot to talk about. And we're always really psyched to see each other when we do see each other. And another thing is we don't like to sleep together. Like we don't like I like to sleep. Like I like to starfish out in the bed. Like I like to sleep. Like, so I like to you know, when you say to somebody like, well, we don't sleep together. Like if someone said, hey man, you're sleeping with my wife. You don't mean I'm sleeping with your wife. There's no problem if I'm asleep with your wife. It's that I'm having sex with your wife in the bed that's a problem, right? So you do know you could have the sex and then just go sleep in different rooms and you'll sleep better and you'll still get to have had sex. And then you'll actually wake up the next morning maybe more refreshed and have more sex. So it's really not, but like we've got it in our heads that, well, no, you have to sleep in the same bed. Why? Who said that? Like, what is that? Listen, if you're two people that like to sleep spoon together, okay, that's cool, man. I don't like that. Like, but if you like that, great, you know, enjoy yourself. All that matters is if you and your partner are on the same page and have something that works for the two of you. So again, I'm a relationship libertarian. I think people should have conversations free from the filter of this is how we should feel and what we should do, or use those shoulds as an entry point to say, okay, well, here's what they're telling us. Is that true for us? You know, here's what they're telling us. Is that important to you? Because they're telling me it's supposed to be important to me, but to tell you the truth, it ain't that important to me. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the beauty. That's not an overcorrection. That's a change I think is coming. Like some of the things I see in like the, you know, I hate to say trad wife concept.
The trad.
Like,
I wanted to ask you, did you think that's gonna, because they think that's gonna fix it, and it's like,
well, here's what I'll tell you. I think there's a tremendous, if anyone actually believes in feminism as to what it was intended to be, it was the idea that people were liberated from the oppression of like, because of your gender or your sex, this is what you are required. So men, you know, you get to either be Richard Simmons or Clint Eastwood. Those are your two choices. Like you don't get anything in between. You have to have no emotional vocabulary. You got to be, and by the way, you can't be a nurse or you couldn't be a teacher. Those aren't men professions. Like my mother was brilliant. She was brilliant. She was in her high school. She was the top math and science student. And they said to her, you can be a nurse or you can be a teacher. And she said, well, you know, actually, I thought like maybe I could go to medical school, you know, like I have the highest math and science marks. And they said, yeah, no, but you can be a nurse or you can be a teacher. And then eventually you're going to meet a man and then you're going to marry and then you can be a wife and you can be a mother. you know. And she did. She became a nurse, and then she worked as a nurse. Then she met my dad. He was he's an Annapolis graduate. He was on Fleet Week in New York City, and the two of them met in a bar, and then they were married for 53 years till she passed away. And they had very traditional life and very traditional. But my mother always resented the fact that she was told these are the only things you can be. And she was very happy being a mother. She was very happy being a spouse. But like, it was not fair to say to her, this is just as it is unfair to say to women, you have to be a CEO,
Yes.
or you have to be,
Exactly.
and to say that it is not, if your heart wants to be a spouse and caregiver, or a homemaker, or a parent, or a mother, or an artist, or any of the myriad of things that people want, then this is what feminism is about. So I thought that the trad wife space was about a truly feminist message, which was, listen, you go do you. If you want to be a CEO, knock yourself out, lady. But I want to be home. I want to bake banana bread and hang out with my husband when he gets home from work. Like, this is what I want. Well, this gives me joy. And if the person I'm with, that complements them and that creates the polarity that we enjoy, then that's it. So I think the answer to your question, Rin, is that, you know, just whether you're single or whether you're in a relationship and thinking about getting married, I always tell people, ask yourself the question, what is the problem to which marriage is a solution? Because most people don't ever ask that question. Like, what I want to, like, no one ever says, I'm getting married, and someone goes, why? Like, why? Like, everyone goes, oh my God, congratulations. Or, oh no, really? You know, why, dude? You know, party's over. Like, why wouldn't you go, oh, really? Why? Like, that's not a crazy question. You know, and if you go, well, I want to put her on my health insurance, that's a pretty good fucking answer. Health insurance is expensive, you know? Like, if you have a prenup, get married as many times as you want. I don't care. It's pretty easy then, you know, but in or out of. But most people, if you said to them, why'd you get married? They would look at you like you had lobsters coming out of your nose. Like, it would be like if you asked them, why don't you have sex with your sister? Like, they look at you like you're crazy when you say, well, why are you getting married? Like, what's the reason? Like, what's the hole it fills for you? What's the purpose of it? Like, what's the, it's assumed you're going to get married, period. It's assumed. And if you say, I'm not going to get married, that's when people are allowed to go, really? Why? You know, and I think it should be the other way around. If someone's got a 56% fail rate, you should ask someone why they're going to do it. You know, if I said to you, I'm going to go jump out of an airplane now, you'd be like, really? Why? You know? Whereas if I said, you know, I'm going in an airplane, I'm just going to stay in the airplane, I'm not going to jump out of it, you wouldn't go, really? Why? You know, like, it, because it's the nonsensical thing to do. You know, so if you're going to do something nonsensical, ask why. And as far as I'm concerned, statistically, marriage is nonsensical.
Yeah, well, you know what? I kind of like this line of thinking, and like, we're kind of to an earlier point of where we're going to see this swing back. A lot of religious people have, I think, somewhat rightfully so, feel kind of almost like vindicated with a lot of the stuff that's been going on recently. And I was talking with Rolo and some of the other guys about this kind of stuff, and like, it's almost like they think that if their worldview is implemented, that all the problems would vanish. Where like, if everybody was a perfect devout Christian, Catholic, insert your religion here, then all the problems would go away. Which I'm not saying that things wouldn't potentially be better, but like, there are always going to be problems no matter what. But Brandy, I'm sure you see what I'm saying. Like, people think,
I know exactly what people think. I've definitely seen this. This is the thing, is like better in what way is
exactly. Well, there
might be there's always trade-offs. So certain things are going to be better, but certain things
and I also think you're in the wrong country for that. Like, you're in the wrong country for that. Like, there's plenty of countries. If you want that, there's plenty of countries for that.
Well, I think they want to turn this country
into that. Look at your currency. Look at your currency. It says e pluribus unum. Like, from many one. Like, that's America, guys. That's what we signed on for. And I like it. Like, I like e pluribus unum. I like the idea that from the many we make one. The thing we have in common is we are American, you know? And it used to be that like I came from a German family that had some Slavic roots. And as a young person, I was taught to respect, honor, be proud of, embrace, carry forward the traditions of the culture my family came from or originated in. But we were above all else American. And we were really proud of that because we came from these places. We were not abandoning our traditions. We were honoring our traditions, and we wanted to share our traditions with people who didn't have that background. And that's what America was about. America was all these different people from different places would come together and would embrace each other, you know, in so many ways. And I really, really think that it makes a tremendous, we no longer have the one. Like the twilight of our common dreams has come. Like we have nothing that unites us anymore. Other than
because people are confusing like being patriotic or like caring about America also with like nationalism, and like those are the same thing, which they're not. They're completely separate things, not the same. What you're talking about, I think, is a good thing. And I think a lot of people feel like in order to do that, you have to become like a nationalist person or something.
Yeah, and I actually think quite the opposite. It's not the flag, it's what the flag stands for. And I think look, symbols are really important. They're really important. Like I believe in symbols. I have a crucifix hanging in my home which is a symbol to remind me of something. I have tattoos on my body that are symbols. I have the Pax Christi. I have things on me to remind me. Symbols are important. They're really important to remind you of the things you need to try to remember, and that it might be easy to let out of your line of sight. But it's not, don't confuse the moon and the finger pointing at the moon as the same thing.
One of my favorite quotes.
You know, you really have to look at like you, I don't understand people that claim to love America but clearly hate Americans.
Yes.
So
like that doesn't make any sense to me.
I would love to hear more of your like what you're seeing when you talk about that. I mean, I'm the token leftist on this panel, I guess. So I know a lot of people who are very like vocally like, you know, America can do a lot of things better. America does a lot of things wrong, but I think most of them still love at least the idea.
Do
of
they?
America.
I've met some of your friends.
So I mean, listen, I know a few like anarchists, and they're just like any fucking
I know
port
a lot of anarchists.
with
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that like a lot of them don't love the idea of America.
So
well, I think a lot of them are very focused on, like I love the idea that America is a country where we're allowed to speak openly about what we think the government's doing wrong. Agreed. Like that's one of the things that makes America so awesome is that like you don't get to in China stand up on a soapbox in the middle of public square and say fuck the president, you know, but in the US you not only get to do that, the cops will protect you if somebody's trying to hurt you. Like that's incredible. You know, as opposed to you'll get killed by the police for doing that. So I really respect. But I am someone who has, you know, I have very diverse political beliefs, but fundamentally, I believe we have an incredible structure from a governmental standpoint. Like I think what we're doing right now is not what representative democracy was supposed to be. But democracy was the triumph of the people over the empire. Like that's what it was. Like Michael Parenti's book Against Empire or Democracy for the Few, like those are some of the best books I think ever written, because I really believe that like there is a word for the triumph of the will of the people over the empire, and that word is democracy. Like that's what democracy is. But the downside of democracy, gang, is you don't get everything you want.
Yes.
You have to live with the fact
works on a small scale, not on a large scale, which is like where, like, I think that the larger democracy gets, the less it works, but it works.
Well, it's because the challenge is the pluribus is the harder part than the unum. You know what I mean? All of these people like the Matt Walshes and the Michael Knowles and the whole everybody on Daily Wire, like their whole thing is like, well, if we were all just other than Ben, it's like, well, even though he's an Abrahamic religion too, they're all like, well, if we all believed in the exact same God, we'd all get along better. Well, no shit, guys. Like that's, you know, really like,
but it's not even true. We already like all the war.
But like if we could all agree on the same fundamental concepts, you know, we'd all get along better.
The same denomination.
Right.
Well, that's way down to the fucking.
That's not what we were supposed. You want to move to a country where everyone is the same religion and the government is very much tied into the religion. We have those countries, guys. We're currently dropping drone missiles on them. Like this is like that's because they're chopping each other's heads off in the desert. you know, and they're stoning people, you know. So I don't know that that's like what we should aspire to. I think what we should realize is that, you know, there is room for like my neighbor who is an atheist and my neighbor who is a fundamentalist Christian both love their children. They both want to be safe. They both want to be, they don't want their kids to learn the same things all the time, but they both want their kids to learn math. You know, they both want them to. So I think you can like really, I think we have more in common, but what we have in common isn't that interesting. Listen, man, nobody wants to watch a talk show like the ones like that used to exist. Like Phil Donahue, where everybody agrees with each other. You want to watch people throwing chairs at each other and debating and screaming at each other. Right. It's way, way, way more interesting.
Well, that's why this podcast exists. We're trying to bring it back to the middle a little bit.
Yeah, I know, you know, like I haven't agreed with you yet, which is like this is rare. I usually disagree with someone like at least once or twice. This is
So like I'm just that charismatic, Randy. That's what it is.
You are. But like if you look at like both sections of like terminally online people, specifically people that may be on like the hard left or hard right, it's that you constantly hear, well, this side wants you dead. This side, you know, that like people act like everybody just has these hard values, and like you can tell this about somebody from like a conversation. But like I had somebody on my show yesterday that was literally like an avowed Marxist communist, and him and I agreed on so much it would make your head spins when we're on completely different ends of the spectrum. But like it's just a matter of like understanding that like we both, pretty much most people are going to agree like, hey, I just want to be able to like feed my family, take care of my kids, and have a good relationship with people who mean the most to me. But like outside of that, we have small disagreements.
And understanding too, like, and even if you can't reconcile those disagreements, one of the things I like about Mark Liotta's work in Soft White Underbelly and some of those things is that I genuinely believe that if you take away all these crazy agendas and all the finger pointing, if you talk to someone about their lived experience, you can usually figure out why they're the way they are, or why they believe what they believe. You know what I mean? Like if you grow up in a neighborhood where like everybody's shooting each other, you're going to believe the world's a dangerous place. And if you grow up in a neighborhood where like the cops are really helpful and there's not a high crime rate, you're going to go, why is everybody so worried about the world being so dangerous? It's lovely out here. You know, so like if you talk to someone and they have a different point of view than you, but you don't immediately start telling them why they're wrong and you're right and why they're an idiot or they're evil. And instead you talk to them about like, well, why do you think what you think and what in your lived experience brought you to this? And I'm, you know, for me, that's really kind of what I do for a living. Like what I do for a living is I try to explain to a judge why someone is or feels or thinks the way they do, why the mistakes
take a lot of
they
empathy.
make.
Because
it requires a tremendous amount of empathy.
Yeah, because you have to put yourself in the position of sometimes maybe like a domestic abuser or someone that like you dislike. You're like, you're a shitbag, but I have to see why you are this way.
Right.
And figure
but
it
if
out.
But if you know, I'm humble, and I'm humble enough to admit, I have to tell you, I you know, it is so fucking convenient for people to say that, well, I would have been part of the resistance. You know, I would have hid Frank in my attic. Bullshit. Like read Denny Goldhagen's book, Hitler's Willing Executioners, where he says like, no, you're not. You would have been a Nazi. Because everybody was a Nazi, because the Treaty of Versailles had caused such impoverishment, and you were so like, and the information that was coming into you was not the totality of information that now everyone can see in hindsight and retrospect. Like it wasn't that this whole group of people were all just evil. They were just born evil, you know? No, they were misinformed. They were misled. Their fear was weapon. Like politics is the systematic organization of human hatred. That's all that it is. Like all politics is just taking people's hatreds and weaponizing them, you know. And what I do for a living to some degree is I weaponize people's hatred, people's prejudice, people's fears. Like that's what I do. I look at the person in the black robe. I look at the adversary on the other side of the table, and I figure out how do I make them scared? How do I make them feel sympathetic? And how do I make them hate that person? And that's my job, is to play all these sides against each other and create that leverage. But I will tell you, what that actually causes you to do after you've done it for 20 years is you start to realize like it's just people. Like it's just
Mhm.
people. It's hurt people hurting people. It's scared people doing scary things, you know, or running, you know, away from things. Like it's just human beings, man. And I'm not saying that like anything anyone does is excusable. I don't believe that. I believe people should be accountable for their actions. I believe, you know, you can explain something, it doesn't excuse it, but it's worth it to like understand things, especially things that you look at and I go, well, I don't understand that person at all. Like, I don't understand how the hell they would be that way. Like, we spend so much time talking to women about rape and what they can do to prevent being raped and what, you know, like all that. But men are the ones raping them, you know? So, like, why don't we ever talk to men about, like, why is this happening? Like, why is this a thing that I'm not blaming men, I'm not blaming women for rape, but what I'm saying is that the majority of rapes are men raping women. That's how it works. Like that's the majority of rapes. If you count prison rape, then it changes the statistics slightly. But the majority of rapes are men raping women, and most of them are acquaintance rapes. But at the end of the day, like anytime you try to go, well, why don't we talk to men about rape instead of talking to women about rape? They kind of go like, oh, well, you know, you like it's not our job to, you know, be, or like, why do we talk about, you know, victims of domestic violence instead of talking to perpetrators of domestic violence and figure out like why they are the way they are and what environment they were raised in and like what did they observe and witness and how can we prevent that or how can there be early interventions on those kinds of things that could have some discernible effect or not. I just don't. I think we shoot at all the wrong fucking targets, man, because we're little kids that like pro wrestling. We want there to be good guys and bad guys and simple solutions to complicated problems. And that's just a childish way of looking at the world.
So I feel like you just kind of explained something that I've tried to explain, but I'm not as eloquent. Because I was in an abusive relationship for a while, and I've always said I actually don't see myself as a victim, and it's because I see why he is the way that he is, and like that situation. And I actually think that changes your perspective if you can like actually uh take yourself out of making it about you and like just seeing the big picture and being like, oh, like you are also, there's a lot of reasons why this happened, and like and taking like, you know, self ownership for a lot of things. I think a lot of times people get into like domestic abuse relationships and they don't take self ownership and they just fully
Sure.
put things on the other person, but like there are things that you did that triggered them and you didn't
Sure.
really realize, you know, like so all of that. I
Sure. And
think
there are
that
things that there are things that, you know, as someone who's worked in the area of intimate partner abuse, domestic violence, coercive control in a real way for a long time. Like I've worked in the integrated domestic violence courts in New York City. I've represented children as what's called an AFC, an attorney for children, in cases with intimate partner abuse and domestic violence. And I have to tell you, like, we are not doing the world any favors by painting perpetrators of domestic violence as like ogreish, evil, nasty. Like
yeah,
they're
no.
incredibly charismatic much of the time. They're incredibly like they're very like I can't tell you how many times I've met the alleged perpetrator of domestic violence and I've been like, oh, there's no way, this guy's fucking awesome, I would have a beer with this guy, he's so nice, he's so likable, she must be making that shit up. And then I like see the ring camera footage that was accidentally captured and I go like, oh my God, this guy's a monster, you know, like holy cow, like how does that happen, you know? But the truth is that, you know, the human emotional complexity is a real thing. But you know, the problem is, you know, Brandy, is that I'm sure if we were to do a deep dive into the dynamic between you and a person who you had an abusive or toxic kind of relationship with, we would like really need to look pretty deep into it. Like we'd have to not only like understand sort of how did it start, how did it perpetuate, how did it kind of very slowly and then all at once become a certain dynamic, and then once you realize it, like what do you do with that and how invested are you in it, and what lessons did you learn from the relationships you observed prior to that, and what lessons did this person. So like it's a complicated problem.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better if we could just be like, you know what caused that, Brandy? The Mexicans. The Mexicans caused it. Like, oh my God, that'd
The
be
Jews,
so better.
that's what they always
Like,
say.
the Jews, somebody, like, give me some. Give just give me some other I can point to, because it would be so much nicer if it wasn't like this incredibly complicated Gordian knot of a problem, but that's just not how it works. Again, we just have to start being grown-ups, period.
Yeah.
Like,
And
we just have to stop looking at the world like toddlers.
Yeah, like human complexity, I think, is what you're saying is that humans are complex, and unfortunately a lot of people like to, I don't know, they like to have something simple to solve
because it's a wish. I mean, it's a wish. Listen, I wish it was simple too. I'd feel a whole lot safer. I just did an interview. I was on the Iced Coffee Hour, and it's a great show. I like the host a lot, but he's newly engaged, and maybe it's because he caught me at like the end of the day, but I was kind of tired, and it was like an in-person one, so I wasn't even like, I'm home now, I'm cozy, I'm not wearing my lawyer costume. And I was like in his studio, and he's newly engaged. And like, whenever I'm talking to somebody who's like newly engaged, like I feel like I'm talking to like a developmentally disabled person, like because they're like, marriage is so great, it's gonna work out great. And I'm like, it's like I'm with someone who's like, I'm a choo-choo train, and I'm like, okay, I'm a helicopter, we're all having fun. Like, it's like whatever. Like, this is what you do when you're with a kid at a party. You just play the game they want to play. So he's talking to me and he goes, well, obviously, like you deal with people that cheat a lot. And, like what are some things people can do to like prevent, cheating in their relationship? And I was like, well, I don't know. There's some things maybe you could do, but like, there's no, like, I can't give you like a BuzzFeed list, man, of like, here's 4 things you can do to adultery proof your marriage. And he's like, well, but like, there has to be like certain personality traits that, and I was like, is it really? Like, is there? Like, there has to be? Like, when you say there has to be some personality traits, like, what are you basing that on? Like, because I don't know what that even means. We either have to be personality traits. Like, no, there don't. There do not have to be certain personality traits that are predictors of infidelity. Like, and the example I gave to him is I said, look, like when you're a kid, they tell you don't smoke cigarettes and look both ways before you cross the street, and don't drink bleach. And like these are the things they tell you. And then one day they tell you about aneurysms, and you're like, wait, what is that? And they're like, well, you're just sitting there and then you die. And you're like, well, right, but like, what can I do to prevent that? And they're like, no, nothing. You can't do anything. You're like, okay, well, but like what? So if I start to see the symptoms of it, well, you'll have a headache and then you'll be dead in 5 minutes. You're like, well, what? Could I go to the doctor? And they're like, yeah, but you'd have to get there in 4 minutes, and then he couldn't help you. You just die at the doctor instead, and you kind of go like, well, what if I do like a lot of zone 2 cardio? And they're like, no, that's good to do. And you're like, oh, will it help with aneurysms? Yeah, no, not at all, but it is good to do zone 2 cardio, because really the answer is God goes like eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and like gives you an aneurysm and then you die. Now, it's really easy. Like, the childish thing would be to either go, well, then I don't believe in aneurysms. Like, okay, well, that's fucking dumb, because they're a thing. Like, that's a thing, guys. And it's equally dumb to go, well, there's a thing called aneurysms, so smoke them if you got them, man, and don't look both ways when you cross the street, because we're fucked. Like, because that's equally ignorant. So why can't you just go, all right, look, we're going to control for what we can control for. We're going to do what we can do to be healthy and vibrant. But we're also going to realize that sometimes just shit falls out of the sky, man, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so, like, remember that, every day could be your last day. Hopefully it won't be, And I feel like with divorce, with infidelity, like, yeah, man, pay attention, treat your spouse nicely, have sex with your spouse so that they're hopefully satisfied, try to like remember that, their love isn't permanently gifted, that it's loaned. And like try to remember that there was a time where you felt really grateful that this person was going to give you their love, and that you felt really proud to give them yours. And like, those are all really good pieces of advice, but will that be a guarantee? No, it won't be a guarantee, but like nothing's a guarantee, and it's okay. It's still beautiful. It's still great.
I have great advice for lowering your incidence of cheating, but nobody in our audience wants to hear it. So
I want to hear it.
I'm very hard to cheat on because we're open, and if you want to sleep with other people, go sleep.
I did.
Yeah.
just for the average person.
Well, here's what I will tell you though, is I actually think, it's kind of like what Gandhi said, that the perfect society would be an ordered anarchy. Like I will tell you, I sleep with as many people as I want to, which is one. Like,
but I love that.
One.
That's great.
The one's good enough for me. Like, but I sleep with as many people as I want to. Like, I'm not sleeping with other people because I'm not allowed. Yes, I don't sleep with other people because I'm very happy. My needs are met. Like, I'm having a good time. And I also know that sex with that there's no such thing as sex with no consequences. Like, sex creates emotional consequences. It creates whatever, epidemiological ones. It can create all kinds of consequences. So I look at it and I go, hey, am I happy? Am I enjoying the sex I have in my life? Is it also like really free from complication because it's in the context of a relationship where we care about each other as people? Yeah. Do I care if you want to sleep with 50 people? Listen, man, if it's good for you, it works for you, and you and your partner.
My method definitely increases complexity. I do agree with that.
I'm sure it does. Listen, I have to tell you something. When I first got divorced, I you would think I was getting paid to sleep with people. I was having a lot of fun, but it got to the point very quickly where I was like, this is like a job. Like, this is not really fun. This is like, wait, what day am I going to see this person, and what am I? And like, what do I?
I feel like that's Rin.
Listen, I like it. I like the organization. I like the calendaring.
God bless you. I mean,
it overwhelms me.
That's the way I feel about it.
See, my OCD kicked in. I was very like, oh, this is exhausting. And maybe I'll make a Google calendar. I have to figure out a way to, forget it.
That's like my podcast. I swear to God, it's like, okay, Monday this time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. My wife works these days. My dog just got stitches, so now I have to watch him and schedule around that. It's like, holy fuck. I feel like I'm
people that can get out of their own head even for a second. Like example, I feel like in this group I can share this. I hate when I end up in a situation where I have to go to a strip club. Like,
wait,
where
do you not
I
like
would never
because I love them.
I don't like strip clubs, and I'll tell you why. I'm glad you asked, Brandy. It's not for the reasons you would think. Like, I think naked women are a lovely thing to look at. It's possibly like, it must be what, like when a woman sees the sunset, that must be for them what, like looking at every time I see a woman's breasts, even if it's the same breasts I've seen for many years, I feel like a little kid at Christmas. Like, I want to go like, it's just what I wanted. Like, I want to applaud. Like, every time I see a woman's breasts, like, I just love it. They're amazing. They're perfect. But I have to tell you, when I go to a strip club, which I would never do intentionally, I do it if I'm in Vegas with friends and they're like, come on, we have to go to a strip club. Or if I like someone's bachelor party or something, which thankfully as a man in his early 50s, I don't have to do that anymore. So like there was a period of time where everyone was getting married and I had to do that. Now I don't have to anymore. But I don't know where to look. It freaks me out. So like you're sitting at the thing.
Y'all
like,
think about
like
that?
stage.
I'm bisexual. I look wherever the fuck I want.
Oh my God. No.
Well, yeah, the difference is if you look and touch, they're not going after you. They'll go after
deeper.
us.
No, but go deeper than that.
Wait,
Brandy, wait a minute. Okay. Yes, they're
there to be looked at.
Well, wait.
I manage a strip club. I'm very
girl.
confused.
Okay, I'm telling you, here's the problem as far as I see it. All right, so I'm not talking about when they come up and they want to do a lap dance sort of thing or a solo dance. That's different.
On the stage.
I'm talking about the part where you sit there and they're on the stage. Okay. So they walk up and you look up at them and you're like, okay, I'm going to give her my undivided attention now because it's rude otherwise. Like, it feels rude. Like, if I'm talking to my friend and I have a naked woman standing in front of me, I'm like, oh, no. Okay, excuse me, sir. Give me 1 minute.
No, you talk while looking. You talk out the side.
Okay, here, listen. Guys.
We'll teach you, James.
No, you won't, because I have overthought this. You don't want to go how deep I go with this. Because for example, I get so uncomfortable that I actually thought, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Because they don't really care. They just want the money, which is fine. I appreciate this economy. It's honest. So I'm talking to so I'm like, when she gets to me, I'll pretend I'm having a very important conversation with my friend, but I will give her a $20 bill or $100 bill, whatever I have to give her to get her the fuck away from me. I'm going to give her it, right? So I will then look up like, oh, yes, quite lovely you are. Here's a bunch of money. Please move on to the next guy. And then I can go back to talking to my friend. Problem is if you give a girl a bunch of money when she
no.
first comes up to you, they're like, ooh, let's stay here, which is the opposite of what I was trying to
when
do.
you give the money, you got to ask them to move on. We got you, James.
Rin,
You
are
I feel
wrong.
very rude. All right, but if they stay, wait, and now if they stay, but hold on, if they stay, here's the problem. Ready? I like women's faces. I think like you can give me a woman with a gorgeous body. If she's got a bad face, I'm out. Like I like faces, right? Faces are important. So I think a woman with a pretty face, and by the way, like a lot of the women, you know, in an adult club, beautiful faces, you know, big hair. I don't know how much of it's real, but lots of hair, you know, the whole thing, very put together, makeup, the stripper lashes, the whole thing going on. So I'm very happy to look at their face. So I'm looking at them. I'm like, oh, she's so cute. Look at this one. But then I'm like, oh shit, she's naked. It feels rude to not be admiring the fact that she's naked. So then I'm like, let me look at, okay, this is lovely, this whole thing. And then I'm like, dude, you're just staring like right here at this woman's naked. Like be a gentleman, look up at her face. So then I look up at her face and I don't know where to look. I just keep going up and down.
You're overthinking this, sir.
I started this, Brandy, by saying I was overthinking this. I know you're not telling me something I don't know. I'm sharing, you know, I don't feel very judged right now. Yes, I'm overthinking it. I don't know how to not overthink it. Like I would devote some of the time to this in my book if I could have. But
if you have the opportunity, go to strip clubs in Canada. They're really friendly and very nice. It'll probably help with a lot. Yeah, they're like,
do you like my tits, eh?
I mean, honestly, they're so polite. They're just like, you know, it's really. I've never been to a better strip club experience than in Montreal.
Like, I'm gonna go see what that's a boot. Yeah.
We have a question actually. Hi, James. How would you feel about keeping no fault, but making it so the person who leaves the marriage for no reason gives up their claim on marital assets, alimony, first dibs on custody?
Yeah. So here's the problem. How do you prove that someone left a marriage for no reason? Like, see, lawyers don't care what you know. We care what you can prove. And the truth sometimes is at the bottom of a bottomless pit. And the problem with anything that's fault-based is you have to be able to prove it. And a lot of what happens in a marriage happens behind closed doors, and people don't beat their spouse in front of other people. They don't, you know, like, so even like adultery, like most people don't do that in public, like most of the time. So what we used to do when you had to prove adultery is you'd have to show what was called inclination and opportunity, which meant you'd have to show through some evidence that these people appeared to have a very affectionate relationship, that they had the inclination to potentially sleep together. And then you had to show that they had the opportunity to sleep together. So that's where like the idea
was that enough
of a private investigator with the binoculars and the camera came into the zeitgeist, right? So the truth is that, like, if you try to tie anything economic or anything related to the kids to whose fault it was that the marriage ended, like and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but if I say, okay, well, if you cheat, you lose custody or you lose alimony. Well, what if I cheat because you refuse to have sex with me and haven't had sex with me in 3 years? Or what if you don't even talk to me and I just assumed that, okay. Or what if the cheating that I do is that I go and get a hand job at one of those massage places, right? Where I don't even know the person's name. I'm not having intercourse with them. It's like, it's not, I think we can all agree it's not the same as having, right? But it's not the same thing as like having a girlfriend and like having feelings for the person. This is an anonymous transaction to some degree, and it's not even an exchange of bodily fluids between two people. So, you know, the point becomes like you get into this very thorny ground of like, what's the burden of proof? How much proof do you need? How egregious does the fault have to be to merit the relief requested? Because here's what I'll tell you. Like, if you cheat, I don't think you should lose custody of your kids.
Yeah.
It just means you're a shitty husband or a shitty wife. Doesn't mean you're bad.
I agree with you 100%.
You know, like just because you know, like, okay, you can cook, does that mean you can farm? Like the skill set for a father and the skill set for a husband is totally different. I can tell you, I'm a shitty husband. I'm impatient. I'm a workaholic. I don't like sleeping in a bed with another person. Like, I got a whole list of things. I don't know what to do at strip clubs. That made me a good husband. But like, there's a whole list of things. There's a whole list of things that make me a shitty husband, but I'm a really good dad. You know, my ex-wife jokes with me all the time. She's like, you were a terrible husband. You're an awesome ex-husband. She's like, you're a great ex-husband. She's like, an ex-husband and co-parent, you're reliable. You're a good communicator. I could always, if you said you were going to be there at 5 to get the kids, you'd be there at 4:45. Like you were always like consistent. If you said you were going to pay for something, you always paid for it in full and on time. Like, you know, I'm a good ex-husband, you know, like I'm not a good husband. Like I don't fucking care. I don't want to have that conversation with you.
Would you be comfortable asking questions about like, did you have that level of communication in the marriage?
In my marriage?
Yeah.
Or what I mean, I think that in marriage, we can walk away from this if you don't want to talk about it. No, I'm totally comfortable with it. I've never talked about it, but not out of any sense. My ex-wife and I are very close friends. She's been remarried for 12 years to a great guy. I consider him a friend. Like we've raised our kids really effectively together, the two of us, and they're adults and like super well adjusted. One's a prosecutor in the Bronx. He's an attorney, and the other one's in law school. Like I've a great ex-wife. I have great kids. I have a great, you know, she's got a great husband, you know, like we're all good, man. Like everybody gets along. I was wildly impatient as a husband. I did not like, what's amazing is if you met my ex-wife is very happily married. And if you met the guy who she was very happily married to, and you met me, you would go, no one woman could love both of these men. Like you like one or the other, you know, because I am fast talking. I am very fast paced. I'm impatient. Like if you try to talk, I'm like, come on, we got to land this plane. Let's go. What? Come on. What are we doing? Let's get to the end. And this guy is a therapist. That's what he does for a living. And he will sit there and listen to you. And he's the way he talks is like this. And he's very empathetic. And when you talk, like it is painful for me to even do that imitation. When I sit with the guy, like I'm almost like it's like I'm looking at like a different species, you know, like I'm like, how do you talk like that? It's the most it's soothing, but my God, man, you know, and I think he finds me just like, he doesn't know what to do with this.
Overwhelming.
You know? Yeah. But you know, like that is exactly what she needed, was that guy, you know, especially at that chapter of life. I don't know. Like I watch, you know, him with her on the rare occasions we've all kind of been in the same place. And like, he like listens to her and he's like paying attention. And he's like, okay, babe. Yeah, that sounds good. You know, and very like, you know, they love to do everything together, you know? So if like he's running out to the store, she's like, oh, I'll come with you. And he's like, okay, yeah, that'd be great. Let's go do that. Whereas I'd be like, wait, why? Why would you come with, like, I'm going to this. Why do you need, what? Like, that's weird. What are we going to, part of the reason I want to go is because I actually want to just go be by myself. Like, why would we do that together? You know? And I think that you have to find the person that matches your style of communication and your, you know, and it's not just as simple as like, well, we need to be able to communicate about our needs. Like we could have communicated about our needs till the fucking cows came home. We had incompatible needs. Like it wasn't that we didn't understand what each other needed. It's that we weren't going to meet it, you know, like we weren't going to meet it. We didn't have those tools, you know, like.
I honestly, what you're saying resonates because I feel like as a female, I'm actually a lot like what you're describing, which is hard because it's hard for men to be able to put up with me because I'm supposed to be like this like feminine like archetype of like
but I don't think that has to be not feminine. I think that you know, like
the stereotype, you know what I'm saying?
My partner and I currently, she's very funny because she like she'll joke because I'll be like if I say to her I'll jokingly be like, well, we should make love. She's like, oh my God, never come near me again if you're gonna say shit like that. You know, like that is just like nasty. Like you're gonna make love. Like she's like, we want to put on Celine Dion while we do that, or do you want to just like go fuck? Like that's what's fun, you know? And like I think that like, but I don't think
like
that's
a good time. Can we?
She's
have her
also
on the
like
podcast?
the most like feminine, traditional, cool,
Yeah.
like loves to bake and cook and like very like a lovely person, like vibrates at way less intense of a thing as me. And you'd never think that that's how she talks privately with, you know, with her romantic partner. And I kind of love that. Like, I kind of
Yeah.
love that if it's better, you'd be like, oh, that one's probably boring as hell. And it's like, dude, you'd have no idea. Like, you know, and it's amazing. Like, to me, that's a cool thing, you know? And that's what I think intimacy is supposed to be. Intimacy is supposed to be, I get to see something in you that no one else gets to see. You know, it's part of the reason why, for me, you know, ethical non-monogamy or polyamory is, it's just not for me.
Interesting, though, because
I
that's
really
the internet
like
is changing
the
that.
depth. I like the
Well,
depth
yeah,
that comes
I-
with one person, that I'm really like cultivate this and dedicate myself to it and get to know each other so well, and, you know, kind of get to really like learn each other's like nuances. And you know, that's, for me, that's a lot of fun. I couldn't learn 5 languages at once effectively. I'd rather learn to speak one really well, you know.
No,
But
that's super fair.
Isn't it interesting that the internet is kind of changing that to a degree? Because, like, for in regards to what you said, like, there's a part of you that I know, which, I mean, no matter what, I don't think that you show your entire self to the internet, but maybe a lot of times people are showing a lot more, not just physically.
Well, and I also
Even
think
just-
some of that is very performative, though. Like,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
Instagram is what people want you to
Not even
think they
Instagram,
are.
Twitter, Facebook,
Any
like,
of it. It's
Yeah,
all,
well-
this is who I want you to think I am. Not
Yeah.
like most people's bookshelves is not filled with books they read. It's filled with the books they want people to think they read. You
Oh,
know,
really? I'm
like
doing it
like
wrong.
there's like the scene in The Great Gatsby where he was walking through his majestic library, and he takes one off and he goes, you know, he hasn't cracked any of the spines. And you like open the book, and like, it's that they're a decoration. Like they look, because you want to be the kind of person who would read this book, but you don't actually want to read that book, you know? And that's, I think, the challenge, is that who we'd like the world to think we are or aspire to be versus who we actually are. And that, again, that's where that libertarian streak comes in. That, to me, it's really about being very true to yourself, being very honest with yourself about what you want, and then having that, you know, a circle that has diversity within it. I think there's beauty in diversity. Like, one of the things I love about living in New York City is, like, you can ask someone. I actually overheard 2 young people having a conversation on the subway the other day, where the guy said, where do you want to eat? And he said, oh, you know, you want to go to that Ethiopian place we like? And I thought, the fact that you're like, it presumed that there was more than one Ethiopian place that they go to, and that like, because that's true about New York City. Like, it's like, oh, there's like 15 different countries represented on this block, just in terms of cuisine. And like, to me, that's one of the things that's so cool, you know, about the US, is just the ability to like, there's beauty in like almost every religion and I love religion. I study religion. I'm interested in religion in a tremendous way. And I think that like, there's something so like the Jewish rituals associated with death, like Shiva. I don't think we have anything like that in Catholicism or Christianity. Like, I love all of the things, all the different ways that we can learn from each other. And that's, again, why I love America. I love the idea of from many, you know, coming together as one. Even in this conversation, look, the 4 of us have very different backgrounds. We have different viewpoints on a number of things. We have different approaches. We have different life experience. We come together in candor, honesty, humor, you know, like affection for you know, the discourse that we're having, and for each other's humor. And I guarantee I disagree with each of you about at least 2 or 3 things, maybe a few of them passionately. But like, I would never write you off as human beings because we disagree. You know, I would never, like, I'm a big fan of, like, I think that's what will save us, like, as a culture, as a world, as people, is just recognizing that there is so much inside of us that has value, that to throw the rest of us out because we don't completely match up with each other is just, to me, just the worst. So I think these are the kinds of conversations we need to do more of.
Yeah, I feel like that is the problem, is that people aren't having conversations with people that they disagree with in a lot of ways. And like what you just said,
and Brandy,
Kyle,
that's the problem with marriage too, because people aren't having conversations with each other that are uncomfortable. Like, I think if people in marriages were able to talk to each other more candidly and more comfortably, especially when it's a hard conversation, guys like me would have a harder time making a living. Because I think that if you can say to your spouse or partner, you know, listen, this is hard to say, and I don't want you to hear it defensively, but I'm feeling X, Y, I'm feeling unloved or unnoticed, or I'm feeling unsatisfied, and I'm finding my eye is wandering. And instead of hearing that defensively and be like, well, you know, what do you want me to do? We got 2 kids and I'm super busy and da-da-da. Like, no. Like, say like, okay, I'm really glad you said that to me. Like, it took a lot of courage to say that to me. And I you know, like, I don't want it to be that way. I want us to feel connected to each other. I don't want you to walk around hungry. Like, I want you to feel like hungry for me. So what can we do? You know, and what can you, well, you know, I would feel more inclined to do this if you did this. So maybe we can work together on that and both get something we want. Like, that's a hard conversation, but you got to have that conversation to get anywhere. Otherwise, what you're going to do is just build resentments, and just everybody can be equally fucking miserable. And we can just continue to just go into this downward spiral that we're in right now. You know, our culture is just adding darkness to a night already devoid of stars, you know?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Someone asks, what did we decide? I just got here. Can
marriages be saved? Yes, we decided that they can be saved, but only for you, old Joe. No, yeah, I think the jury was out on it, but we found out that Rin is more comfortable in a strip club than I am. And if we both went to a strip club, I'd be more likely to leave with one person and he would leave with multiple people. That's my takeaway. That's my takeaway from this.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. And I also, I think that maybe not the traditional way that people think of marriage, the legal. I think this is what's happening, is that people are conflating the concept of like legal marriage and like the sacrament, right?
Spiritual marriage, yeah.
I also think the heading should be, should marriage be saved?
Should it be saved?
Like, should it be saved? Like, you know, it's like, it's kind of like, you know, I'm not making the comparison, but it's like, you know, can we save Hitler? Like, I don't know that we want to save Hitler. Like, maybe let Hitler go. That's okay.
Well, you know, that's gonna be the main takeaway from this clip.
You know, like, okay, but it's okay that he's been shot. You know,
I'm waiting for the clip. Yeah, I'm waiting for the clip now. They're gonna say James Sexton compares marriage to Hitler. That's really the main takeaway.
Stand by it.
I can defend that position. I can defend that. I'm comfortable with that. I am. I am more comfortable with that clip coming out than my conundrum and OCD with strip clubs. I think that's far more. As that was coming out of my mouth, I'm going like, "You're really oversharing right now."
No, that was great. Thank you.
You are letting your craziness show right now.
No,
but
I think that's
Hitler,
actually normal. I know lots of guys that feel that way, actually, that are uncomfortable at strip clubs. I never understood it, but I'm also a female, so
thank you.
I don't know. And I manage the strip
seen
club.
and validated now, Brandy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was very normal. Wait, fuck, I forgot what I was going to say. God damn it. But
that fact.
Yeah. All right. I guess GG's, y'all.
Well, I have to say, guys, this was a pleasure. We should do it again. Kyle and I, when Kyle messaged me after we'd had our long conversation, which again was like this one, we like blinked and it was like, whoa, how long have we been talking? He said to me, like, you got to come on with us. It'd be so much. And I was like, all right, yeah, maybe. But this was a blast. I would do this anytime y'all want. So it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
And
come on
thank
again.
you for having me.
Yeah,
amazing. Let's do it. I'm around. Kyle's got my number. So absolutely. Anytime y'all want.
So give everyone kind of a something where they can find you, get your how they can get divorced.
You can find me at nycdivorces.com. That's my firm's website, nycdivorcesplural.com. My book is available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and wherever fine books are sold. You can download it on audible.com and any of the other audiobook things. It's 8.5 hours of me reading the book, which is coincidentally like 7.5 hours more than my ex-wife ever probably had to listen to me. So that's a lot of hours of listening to me. If you'd like to do it. And on that, I'm only social media I'm on is I'm vaguely on Instagram. Like I log on once every couple of weeks just to like put something up about an appearance or whatever. And that's NYC Divorce Lawyer. But other than that, I'm around. I got a a lot of appearances coming up in March and April. I'm going to be out in LA doing some media out there, and then I'm going back to Austin to do some stuff. So some big things coming, and I'll kind of be all over the place. And but I will always make time to sit down with this motley crew because it's always a lot of fun whenever I get to talk with Kyle, and you guys were a blast tonight. So anytime we can do this, I'll be happy to do it.
Someone wants to know if you voiced the audiobook yourself.
I do. Yes, I do. It was. Yeah,
good.
it's
I
me
think
talking for it is better. It's funny because I'll tell that story some other time. They make you sit in a sound booth and you have to read your book out loud. It's on an iPad and you have to like read your, and then there's like an audio engineer that was like this young woman who was just listening with headphones outside the booth. And then the minute you say, she'll go, okay, start again from blah, blah, blah. And they just keep cutting you off. So by the time it's done, you have read your book out loud like 3 times when you add it all up, all the things you have to repeat. And you really learn to hate your own book. Like you really, you know, and you also learn how you mispronounce so many words, you know, and there's nothing like having this like fucking nose ringed kid, like who was clearly like a lit major at Barnard, you know, being like, you know, yeah, well, it was a very obstreperous. That's obstreperous. Could you do it again from obstreperous? And you're like, you think you can do it again from obstreperous? You know, like much more money I make than you little twat. But you know, it was sorry to the audio engineer if they watch. I don't think it's the target audience. But yeah, it's a fun audio book and it was fun to read it. And it actually outsells the book almost like 10-1. Like we had, my publisher called me up last month and was like, well, we sold, you know, like 16,000 copies of the paperback this month. And I was like, oh, that's good. And she was like, yeah, and the audiobook sold 36,000 copies in the month. And I was like, wow, we're like doing like 3-1. And she was like, yeah, she's like,
I gotta buy it now.
It's not how most books sell. Oh, thanks. Yeah. It's available. You know, you can get it anywhere. Like I said, most the audio book is, I think, you know, I have never listened to the whole thing, but it's very popular. And most of the people that compliment my book say, I loved your book. I mean, I didn't read it. I listened to it, but I really liked it. So that's a great compliment. So yeah, of course, I hope you enjoy it.
Ren, you got some shit.
Yeah, no, I don't exist on the internet yet. It'll keep coming.
Yeah, so 5 till midnight on Mondays. You could watch my show In Liberty and Health, which James was so generous to be a guest on a couple months ago, as he said. Really, really good show. Really, really enjoyed it. And obviously here Thursday nights and A Common Crown. We put our single Cry about a month ago. So if you're into heavy metal, you'll definitely like that one. So yeah, I think that's all I got. And Red Hawk is coming on my show next week on Wednesday, but that's all I got planned. So yeah, a pleasure, guys. This is absolute blast.
Yee. Also, if you're in New England, in the New England area, come to my show, Cult of Art, February 16th. Rin is going to be in it, and he is a fabulous performer, and you don't want to miss it because it's going to be some next level shit. So if you are it's in Boston. If you were in the Boston area, if you're willing to travel, come to Boston. Come see Rin do some wild shit because it's going to be great. And it's called Cult of Art. Instagram. Let's go. All right. And this was an amazing conversation. James, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate this conversation. And also, GG's chat. We love you. Bye.